Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber C Risk Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. A comprehensive IT risk assessment is a formal, structured process that allows organizations to identify, evaluate, and document risks associated with their technology environments. It involves analyzing threats and vulnerabilities, estimating impact and likelihood, reviewing the strength of existing controls, and producing actionable insights for governance, compliance, and decision-making. This is not a quick checklist activity or a reactive exercise. It is a disciplined, repeatable process that supports long-term risk visibility, investment prioritization, and the creation of informed treatment plans. C risk professionals are responsible for ensuring that these assessments are aligned with enterprise objectives, regulatory expectations, and operational reality. On the exam, questions involving risk assessments typically reward candidates who understand the difference between ad hoc reviews and methodical, life-cycle-driven evaluations that connect technical risk with business consequence. There are several triggers that justify or require a formal risk assessment. Many organizations conduct periodic assessments at predefined intervals, such as annually or quarterly, especially to support governance reporting, audits, or compliance reviews. Other assessments are event-driven. These may be triggered by the launch of a new system, the adoption of new technology, or a significant change in the business model. Security incidents or near misses also often lead to targeted assessments. Audit findings may identify gaps in risk analysis or control coverage, requiring a follow-up risk review. Regulatory obligations such as GDPR, HIPAA, or industry-specific standards may require assessments to be completed on a recurring basis or in response to system changes. Contractual obligations with third parties may also mandate assessments before onboarding. On the exam, if a scenario describes a new system launch or regulatory obligation without an accompanying assessment, that is a red flag. The best answers point to the missed assessment as a process gap that needs correction. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. The first step in the assessment process is to define the scope clearly. Without proper scoping, assessments can become too broad to be effective or too narrow to be useful. C-risk professionals work with stakeholders to define which systems, data flows, processes, and assets are in scope. This definition must align with business goals, compliance obligations, and known threat vectors. Critical assets and high-impact business processes should always be prioritized. Scoping also includes identifying who should be involved, including risk owners, control owners, IT leads, compliance representatives, and business managers. Using tools like boundary diagrams, process maps, and architecture schematics helps visualize and validate what falls within the scope. On the exam, questions about assessment sequencing often begin here. Scoping is not just the first step, it shapes the quality and relevance of the entire assessment process. Once the scope is confirmed, C-risk professionals gather the data needed to analyze risk. This includes reviewing existing documentation, such as policies, procedures, incident logs, audit results, and prior risk assessments. Technical testing, such as vulnerability scans and penetration tests, provides up-to-date visibility into current security weaknesses. Interviews and workshops with subject matter experts allow the team to gather qualitative context, understand control realities, and capture operational nuances. Tools like configuration management databases and GRC systems help identify system relationships and historical control performance. The goal of data gathering is to collect both qualitative input, such as user behavior or process design, and quantitative input, such as system uptime, incident frequency, or control test results. On the exam, a scenario with missing or outdated information often indicates that the data gathering step was incomplete. Good answers reflect balanced, well-structured information collection. With data in hand, the next step is to identify and document specific risks. For each in-scope system, process, or asset, C-risk professionals work through a structured model. Identify known threats, identify vulnerabilities, assess the likelihood of exploitation, define the potential impact, and evaluate existing controls. Each risk is defined as a scenario where a specific threat exploits a specific vulnerability in a specific asset, leading to a defined business consequence. For example, if unpatched software in a financial application is exposed to a known exploit, the scenario might involve unauthorized access to sensitive transactions. These risk scenarios must be clearly worded, business-aligned, and traceable. Each one should be recorded in the risk register, with assigned risk owners and scoring logic. On the exam, when a risk is vague or not fully defined, the best answer often involves revisiting the threat, vulnerability, impact chain. Scoring and prioritizing risks is critical to making the assessment actionable. C-risk professionals use consistent methods to rate both inherent risk, the exposure that exists before controls are applied, and residual risk, the exposure that remains after controls are considered. Scoring can be qualitative, using scales like low, medium, or high, quantitative, using monetary values or likelihood percentages, or hybrid, using structured scoring with narrative justification. Scores must be compared against the organization's defined risk appetite and tolerance to determine whether the risk is acceptable or requires treatment. Prioritization involves ranking risks not just by score, but by alignment with strategic goals, legal exposure, and operational disruption potential. On the exam, scoring inconsistencies or mismatched prioritization often lead to poor decisions. The right answer will reflect clear scoring logic, governance alignment, and the ability to differentiate between risk types and treatment urgency. The quality of an assessment depends heavily on involving the right stakeholders throughout the process. Business owners are essential for confirming the impact of potential risk events and identifying which processes are most critical. IT teams are responsible for confirming technical exposure, control feasibility, and system interdependencies. Compliance and legal stakeholders ensure that all regulatory requirements are reflected in the analysis. The risk committee or governing body reviews top risk scenarios, validates prioritization, and approves treatment direction. Cross-functional engagement ensures that risk analysis reflects both technical facts and business priorities. On the exam, if a risk is poorly understood or wrongly accepted, the root cause is often a lack of stakeholder input. Correct responses involve engaging subject matter experts, clarifying impact, and confirming control capabilities before decisions are made. Assessment findings must be clearly documented and reported. Executive summaries help leadership understand top risks and business impacts. Detailed entries in the risk register support traceability and accountability. Visual tools such as heat maps and risk matrices help communicate risk levels across teams. Reports must include all relevant elements: the risk scenario, scoring logic, owner assignment, treatment status, and recommendations for next steps. Where possible, reports should link findings to strategic goals, compliance metrics, and audit objectives. C-risk professionals must ensure that assessments are not just informative, but also usable for planning, reporting, and decision-making. On the exam, if results are unclear, buried in detail, or disconnected from business strategy, the best answer often involves reworking the report to improve clarity, impact, and executive alignment. The assessment process does not end when the report is written. Post-assessment activities are where many of the most important follow-through actions occur. Stakeholders must validate the findings to ensure they reflect the current environment. Treatment planning must begin immediately for high-priority risks, with tasks assigned, deadlines established, and follow-up cycles scheduled. Reporting documentation must be updated, including business continuity plans, disaster recovery procedures, architecture diagrams, and control libraries. Reassessment dates must be scheduled, and ownership responsibilities must be reviewed and confirmed. Risk assessments are living processes. They drive ongoing governance and risk-informed change. On the exam, if a scenario describes a risk that was identified but never acted on, the failure occurred in post-assessment follow-through. The correct answer always involves treatment action and governance updates. See risk exam. Questions involving risk assessment often focus on process integrity, stakeholder alignment, and reporting structure. You may be asked what step comes first in a risk assessment, and the correct answer will involve scoping or initial data collection. You might be asked why a risk was missed or remained untreated, and the root cause may be that it was never assessed, or that scoring or ownership was incomplete. Other questions may ask what is missing from a register entry, and the answer might be a control analysis, scoring value, or impact description. Some scenarios focus on how to use assessment results. The correct next step is to update the organization's risk profile, launch treatment planning, and inform governance decisions. The strongest exam answers show structure, stakeholder engagement, and clear prioritization logic based on impact, exposure, and organizational tolerance. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber C-Risk Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.